and welcome to Paducah Human Rights Commission television show, PHRC Raising the Standard. We are so grateful to our city leaders and to our community friends for making sure this is a very successful show. This episode is all about our new student interns, and although a couple of them couldn't be with us this time, maybe they'll be introduced to you later, but we have 3 stellar students with us today. 2 of them are on set with me right now, and then we'll come back a few minutes later and we'll have another young lady who's going to be with us. But we are so proud of our student intern initiative. They don't get paid, but they don't mind. They learn a lot from Paducah Human Rights Commission about human rights. And then, of course, you can't forget the fact that we have to couple that with civil rights, and they learn various things, and we'll talk about that and even more. So welcome, new student interns. So we'll start right here, and you introduce yourself and say whatever you want to say, and then we'll go to you, young lady, and then we'll go on to some really, really good questions.
I'm Lance Butler. I'm a junior at Paducah Tilghman High School.
Good to see you, Lance.
And I'm Hanna Fisher, and I'm a senior at Paducah Tilghman High School.
Good to see you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Who are your parents? Go ahead and give a shout out to your parents.
Danny and Lori Butler.
May Fisher and Tarek Syed.
You know, I think that we shared with you during your initial interview that family was very important. And so I wanted to make sure that your parents know that by evidence how important they are. The other thing that we shared is that your education, your health, and your me time are very important. And so we try to work things out with Paducah Human Rights Commission, where our board members and our student interns can always feel confident that those things are always very important. At the very same time, what's important is keeping your commitment. So, Ms. Fisher, let me start with you. Tell us a little bit about what you included in your letter of interest, which was one of 3 documents required for application.
So basically what I talked about was that joining the Paducah Human Rights Commission would help me I don't know, just like change my outlook maybe on the different ways that I could help like improve human rights in our society, and I think that's very important to do. So that's...
Well, let me stay with you for a moment.
Okay.
What would you say about young people? You've been young for a while now.
Yes.
What would you say about young people and how they really view human rights? Are they well informed about it? Do we need to inform them some more? And are you concerned that they are not informed enough?
Yes, definitely human rights isn't something that's like widely discussed or talked about often, just because, I mean, I don't think it's like at the forefront of everyone's minds, and it's definitely something that needs to be talked about, just because, I mean, definitely in some situations that it could get a little rough, you know, like people aren't treated the way that they need to be treated. And so, yeah, I think that getting people more in touch with it and more information is really important.
Good, good. Yeah, I agree with you. Mr. Butler, can you answer those questions for us?
Yes, in my letter of interest, I discussed how I would really like to be a part of this commission because it would give me a better understanding of how to help improve the community. And basically, I think the Human Rights Commission is founded on the basis that all people have basic rights that they share in common, and that they need to be used to unite the people, because there's a lot of diversity and like not unity, like separation, I guess, among people.
Yes, a lot of diversity, and that whole concept about we're all in the same human race and we are in the same community, and yet we don't appreciate diversity at the level that we ought to. That humane thing. I was talking with some young people recently. I teach at a college in Illinois, Shawnee Community College in Metropolis, Illinois campus. And I teach a sociology class, and we were talking about the necessity of the current generation working diligently to be better than the generations that came before them. What would you say about that, Hannah? How do you feel about making sure that you do better than the generation that came before you?
It's just a reputation thing. Like, you want to make sure that if the generation before your generations, even before then, were not as good as, you know, making sure that everyone was having equal rights, that your generation is like the best, and make sure that your community is the best. And
Very good.
thank you.
How about you, Mr. Butler?
I think in like the history of the world, especially the United States, there's been a lot of inequality, particularly among race and gender, and it's been consistently getting better since. Like obviously, it's slavery that was very, very high levels of inequality, and then it went to there was segregation, but there's not slavery, and now obviously everything's not perfect, but it's a lot farther from where we came. So I think we need to continue to build on that.
Yeah, to
Make it
continue
as
to-
equal
yes,
as possible.
Yes, exactly. Continue to build on that. Build on what's good, delete and unfriend what's not good. How about that? Okay, let's talk about some of the things that you do at your schools. Again, when you respond to that, be sure to give your name of your school. You're going to give the school shout out. Shout out to your principals, and then share what you're doing and what you've accomplished at your schools. Mr. Butler.
I participate in the football team and the track team, and I'm also involved with the academic team, beta club, student council, and mock trial.
Now, you have continued with those in the course of your high school career?
I started track my sophomore year was my first year I did that, but I've done everything else all 3 years thus far. Yeah.
We were laughing earlier before we started with the episode about how you guys, I was so glad that you could be here because you're busier than Philadelphia lawyers.
Yeah.
And keeping that in mind, folk, I want you to know that these stellar students are among all the students that were recommended by either an assistant principal or another person who was acting as a liaison between the Paducah Human Rights Commission and the students and the student body. Ms. Fisher.
Yes.
How would you respond to that?
Are you talking about my?
Yes, the things you're involved in school and
Yes.
from maybe freshman up until the current date.
Yes. All 4 years I've been a member of the varsity tennis team, and I do Interact Club and Beta Club, mock trial, and the FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful, and I'm proud to be in your presence. I know your parents and everybody at your schools are very proud of you. Now, you're both from Paducah Tilghman High School.
Yes.
Who's your principal?
Art Davis.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
And who's your assistant? You have more than one assistant principal?
Yeah.
We kind of have like a dean of students and
Okay.
then
Yeah.
an assistant.
Mr. Jonathan Smith and Miss Allison Steig are both
Yes.
under Mr. Davis.
All right, all right. Now, Mr. Smith was our liaison in a couple of previous years.
Yes.
And so we really appreciate all of them because they made it so very easy for us to launch this initiative. Because without their cooperation and their input and all of the things they've done, including Mrs. Deborah Walton, she also helped out the first year that we launched this initiative, and so we really appreciate all the people who helped us out. Now, we talked about at our board meeting about planning our next event called Evening of Discussion Youth Lead. Last year, our student interns initiated that. They did all the planning, and what we did was all the things that only the adults could have done to help those students, and so we want to build on that. And so early next year, we want to do that again. And you're not familiar with that right now, but in our planning process that we're going to begin at our next board meeting, what are some of the things that you believe are at the hearts of our young people that we ought to consider when we do another annual event? Let's start with you, Mr. Butler.
I think young people are gaining a much greater appreciation for human rights than they have been in the past because they're much more informed. I think that we can use technology, like social media, to promote this and spread awareness of it at a high level.
And so you want to emphasize more on human rights for our young people?
Yeah.
Yes. How about you, Ms. Fisher?
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea, just because I agree with that human rights has definitely become a more important thing just in the eyes of the youth. I think that as well. And then
Okay, well, keeping that thought going, remember when we have that board meeting that you guys will present that. And we want to empower you to do that, to present that you want the Evening of Performance Youth Lead to have the emphasis of human rights for young people. And that event is going to be open to young people. Now, their parents can come, of course, but it's going to be directed only to the youth and their parents if they would like to come. We're going to break away in just a few minutes, and so I want to make sure we touch on a few things. When it comes to race and ethnicity, what are some of the things that you want to tell all people about how we ought to regard different races and different ethnicities? We'll start with you.
Me, myself, I'm pretty, like, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm like a pretty, like, diverse, you know, individual.
Share.
Okay, my background, okay, my father is from Pakistan and my mother's from Estonia. It's a small country in Europe, so very different places. And I mean, personally myself, like, my family's, like, received kind of a little bit different treatment just because my father's background and stuff. Just, so I kind of know how that feels to just be treated not like everybody else, and that's everyone, like every single race, every single ethnicity, no matter what color you are, you should be treated the same. I mean, all men are created equal, right? So why should your race or your color make a difference?
Butler?
I think it's important for people to understand that you should not judge someone like before you meet them by their race or ethnicity, because Martin Luther King said you should judge a man by his character, not by his color of skin. That's, you need to get to know a person before you judge them.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes, and this is what I was taught by my parents, that you don't judge people, you judge their fruit. Fruit meaning the things they put out, the things they do, their behavior, their social, public, private decorum, and all of those things, that we do have a right to judge their fruit, the things that come out of them. But we don't have a right to judge the human beings because we're not their creator. And I want to say that I can't wait until we start the planning process for this event. I know it's going to be wonderful, and so I'm looking forward to finding out what you guys have to bring to the table. And so we're going to break away for a few minutes, and we're going to bring your co-student intern on, who's there waiting in the wings for us. And I want to say that God bless each of you and your households, your families, and thank you for making the time, because you're busy. You're like everybody else, grown folks and young folks, you're busy. And so I want to thank you for making the time to do this and to impact young people. Looking forward to it all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll be back in just a moment. Hello and welcome to PHRC Raising the Standard, the television show for Paducah Human Rights Commission, right here in the award-winning Paducah, Kentucky. Shout outs to Mayor and City Commissioners and our City Manager, and we really, really, really are grateful for all of you allowing us this opportunity and making sure that we have what we need in order for us to do what needs to be done. We are featuring new interns, and a few minutes ago you met two of our new interns, and now it's time for you to meet one more. We have a student intern initiative that started in January of 2012. It has been very successful from the very start, and now we continue that tradition. So welcome and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Addie Rogers, and I'm a junior at Paducah Tilghman High School.
Ah, awesome. And who is your principal?
Mr. Art Davis.
All right. Hello, Mr. Davis. We're giving you a bunch of shout outs today. So on this episode, we want to make sure that, again, we revisit our student intern initiative, and at the same time give an opportunity for our viewing audience to become acquainted with you early on. Some of them will see you out in the community at times when we're doing community outreach and we're implementing maybe our community annual event and so forth. But we want to ask you specific questions, and that is, the first thing I want to ask you is, in your letter of interest, if you can recall some of the context, if you can share some of the reasons why you wanted to join PHRC as a student intern.
Well, I'm a big goal setter, so I set goals for my life periodically. And before my junior year, that's the big year of high school when you're really thinking about, you know, what's the next step. I decided to set a goal for myself and like my community and what I want to do. And my goal was youth involvement and getting the youth, bridging them, you know, into the community. So in our local government and civic rights and human rights, anything that they are passionate about, trying to help that bridge and that gap between our community leaders and the youth. So for me, this was a chance, not only, you know, a good opportunity to understand the civic rights and human rights and what is going on in my community, but to understand it to help youth and my peers be better suited and, you know, to find their passions. And
Excellent, excellent. You said something, and I'm going to stay with that for a minute, is that you want to do what you can do to bridge the gap between community and youth. You know, something that is extremely important for us to stay with for a few seconds, because the Student Intern Initiative is part of the firm foundation, is to bridge the gap between community and youth and vice versa. And the only way that you can do that is to allow young people to become involved in the things that are going on now and things that you could initiate in your involvement in the community. So that was a very important point. I wanted to make sure that we gave that some emphasis. As a young person, I was sharing earlier about how I was so happy that you guys could be here for this episode, because you're very busy. And I was teasing you about being as busy as a Philadelphia lawyer. But here's the thing about what I learned when I was your age, is that if you want something done and done well, don't ask people who are not doing anything. Ask people who are already being productive in doing the right things. And so that's where each of you come. And having said that, share with the viewing audience about the things that you've been involved in, that you participate in since you were a freshman at Paducah Tilghman High School.
Well, I always try to be busy and to do what I'm passionate about and try to get involved in all aspects of my school and community. Some of the things that I do, I'm really involved in the Paducah Tilghman speech and debate team, as well as mock trial, FBLA, which is Future Business Leaders of America, our PEP Club, our Interact Club, as well as with the Interact Club doing a mentoring program for our transition students at Paducah Tilghman.
Wow. Okay, and for people who don't understand that concept of that program, to help with transitional students, what exactly does that mean?
Well, we transition middle school students. So students at Paducah Middle, you know, preparing them. And it was a very fun experience. You know, we're working with young students and, you know, just kind of guiding them along, you know, getting them ready for that big step of high school. And we also did something, and we called it Innovation Lab. And what we did is we try to target them to think about everything differently, you know, to see it in a different light that they've never looked at before, which is a really important skill as you get older and get more involved in your community, to be able to look at it or put yourself in someone else's shoes, you know, how different groups of people view things. And so that's the key to understanding it, is to look in a different perspective. And a lot of times when we're younger, you know, we don't get the chance to do that. We just see the people around us, you know, in our school, and that's, you know, our perspective.
Well, let me stay with that for a minute. That's interesting. I think it was called something else a few years ago. I remember seeing high school students go to the elementary schools and tutor them in the afternoon. I remember seeing that for several years. But this transitional what?
It's through the Interact Club. So we go to the middle school and we do different things. There's I don't quite know how they choose the students, you know, hand-selected. Of course, you know, there's going to be some confidentiality about that, you know, the administrators at Paducah Middle. But through our Interact Club, which is the community service, they choose our officers and our students who they feel will be best suited to help these students. And this year, they're including an interview process for those students.
Outstanding. Isn't that great?
Yes, it's amazing.
I'm much older than you. They didn't have that stuff when I was your age. So I'm grateful about how the leaders in our educational systems have evolved so wonderfully. As it relates to human rights, what are some of the things that you believe that as a student intern you ought to make sure happens through Paducah Human Rights Commission?
Well, I believe in equality. Obviously, being on the Human Rights Commission, that's something that you're passionate about and what you want to fight for. But one of my big things is making sure that you not only show equality, but you see it in a different light. And I think this goes hand in hand with what I was talking about before, but seeing something in a different perspective, like maybe going to different places or learning about how different people see things. You know, we have a lot of different groups in our community who do amazing things, but really coming together as a community. So maybe you go, instead of your church, go look at what another church does and see, you know, what is important to that church, and see, hey, like maybe what my church does is important to me, but this is important to other people, so we need to fight for that as well.
Oh, that's a great point, that what you're doing in your church is important to you, but what's going on in another church may be important to you and other people. Ah, that's good. See, that's going to the heart of it. I'm so impressed with our student interns, and I'm looking forward to learning from all of you. You have so much to give, and you have so much to teach us, because if we're not careful as older adults, we're going to miss some things by not listening and not empowering our young people to do, even in the area of human rights. And so, having said that, during our next board meeting, we will begin to brainstorm on an annual event that was planned by our student interns this last time, called Evening of Discussion Youth Lead. And so this time, a few minutes ago, you were listening as you were waiting in the wings, as your fellow student interns were talking about the emphasis they wanted to place on the next youth lead. And so, having heard what they were saying, what else would you add, or what do you know is absolutely necessary for this next event?
So my fellow interns, they really focused on talking about like the youth and bringing them in, and I think I'm going to go with what I'm saying and what they said, but bringing in those youth and bringing in the adult community members and making them see things in a different light. I know this is hard to picture, but I'm going to try to give you guys an example.
Yes.
So this summer, there's been a curfew for the youth age, so youth. So anyone under the age of 18, that was really it's been in place for a while, but it was really enforced starting this summer. And a lot of the youth, you know, were concerned and, you know, outraged because this is something that they've never seen enforced before. Well, what I challenged my peers was to not only see it in their voice of, you know, getting a ticket for being out later than 1 a.m. or midnight, but to see it in maybe a law enforcement perspective, you know, the safety and protection procedures put in place to protect them, whereas they're just seeing it as they can't go out and, you know, party or do whatever they wanted to do, to look at it into the eyes of a police officer or an adult or, you know, a church member or school principal, you know, because each one of those people brings a different and good perspective to the table. Mm-hmm. So if we have a night like that, I think it can really accomplish a lot with community issues, because everybody has a different mind. Even everybody in the same group may have a slightly different or a completely different view on issue or concern.
Sometimes I have a part of my experience, I guess you would say, is that sometimes adults confuse personal rights and choices and preferences with human rights. And it's important for us to be very specific about that. Today I want to do this, and today it might not be the wise thing for me to do. It might be contrary to a law, or it might cause someone harm. I might get pleasure out of it, but it might cause some hardship for someone else. And so when it comes to human rights, we have to remember that part of being human is being humane. And all of the nonsense and foolishness that's going on in our world today is a result of what a philosopher said a long time ago, the inhumanity to man. And so what you just said is a very mature and sensible, reasonable approach to how we ought to regard things that are in place that are designed to protect us. And so, of course, we have one of the greatest police chiefs on the planet, Chief Barnhill, and so, of course, he would be present with us. He has a heart for young people. He has a heart for people with special needs and our elders of the community. He's just a really great guy. And so the next thing I'd like to maybe point out is that in the planning of this next event, it's going to be very important that it's youth friendly. We want the parents to be present because all of the youth are under adult age. So of course we will want all the parents or the legal caregivers to be present. But it's going to be primarily for the youth and their parents and persons who can bring all of that information and verification to the table. So keeping that in mind, what are some of the things that you want to say to parents of the youth that we want to reach?
Well, I would say that you can gain a lot from coming to this event and watching your children and see what they're passionate about. I know it's sometimes hard to get out of your child what they're passionate about. You know, my mom always asks us, you know, how was your day? What'd you do today? And we were like, good, nothing. You know, so it's sometimes hard to get that message. So coming and really listening to your kid, and you can get a lot out of that and, you know, see what their passions are, you know. And it also can be important to take that one step back instead of getting, you know, the instant gratification, just to watch and see, you know, and learn. And that's true for children as well.
Yes, yes. We're about to wind down. I tell you, we have such enjoyment doing our episodes for our TV show, and it's always sad when we have to sign off. But I want to let you know, as I shared with the other interns who were with us for this episode, that the next time that the interns are on this set, it'll just be the interns, and you're going to be sharing with the public about that event that you're planning, and we're looking forward to that. So thank you so much for taking the time. Your parents, who are your parents?
My parents are Mike Rogers and Rebecca Rogers.
Yes, yes. Shout out, Mom and Dad. So I'm looking forward to the next episode.
Me too.
We thank you so much for allowing us to just be a part of your day. And so we look forward to coming back at you real soon.